Let's make our own stamp pads and then use them to make fingerprint art. Hi, it's Laurie from the art studio at Madison Children's Museum. Today I'm going to show you how you can create your very own stamp pads for fingerprint art using materials that you can get at the grocery store and the dollar store. Let me show you what you need. For our color, we're going to be using food coloring. Now you can also use liquid watercolors if that's a material that you have available. And you can get these at the grocery store or the dollar store. The other materials that we'll need, we're going to be using these little triangular or square makeup sponges, and you can find those in the beauty section of the grocery store or the drugstore. The other materials we'll need, we're going to be using isopropyl rubbing alcohol and glycerin. Now both of these materials you can find in the pharmacy section of a grocery store or at the drugstore. Now we'll need some little plastic containers to make our stamp pads in. These are little plastic boxes that I found at the dollar store, a dozen of them for $1. You could also use little food containers. Now let's get started making our stamp pad. I'm going to put a piece of paper down to protect my table while I'm working, just so that I don't get food coloring everywhere. And this whole process is something that adults can do for younger children, or older kids might enjoy working on this part of the project with you. So let's choose a color for our stamp pad. Now I'm going to make a teal color, which is blue and green together. So what we'll do is I'm going to put some drops of food coloring in my container. Now this whole mixture is really forgiving, so I'm not doing any exact measurements, but I've got, I think, about a half teaspoon of color in my container, and that looks like it'll be just about enough. So after I've got my color in my container, I'm going to be adding equal parts of alcohol and glycerin. And again, I'm going to do about equal parts to my color. So that would be like a half teaspoon-ish of each of these items. So there's my glycerin. And if you have an eyedropper, it might be, oh no, get my bottle cap out of my coloring. Then if you had an eyedropper, it might be a little bit easier to dispense the alcohol. So when we have all of those things mixed together, I'm going to swirl them around. Oh, and see how my teal looks? You know, I think I might want it to look a little more blue, so I'm going to put a few more drops of blue in and swirl it around. You could also use a little spoon if you wanted to. And now I'm going to take my makeup sponge, and these come in triangles, but I want a square sponge. So what I'll do is I'm going to break off 2 of the triangles so that I get a rectangle sponge. And now some of these sponges come in other shapes. You might find them in square shapes or circle shapes. It doesn't really matter as long as it fits in your container. So now what I'll do, I'm going to use my sponge. I'm going to press it down and I'm going to soak up that ink in my sponge. I'm going to try to get it all soaked up, and then I'll flip it over. And here is our stamp pad. Now let's try it out. Let's see what it looks like. I'm going to tap my finger on the top of the sponge. Look at that. So you can make these in all different colors. And since they're in these little boxes, it's very easy to keep them nice and fresh by keeping your lid tightly on your box. And then you could even put your stamp pads in a Ziploc plastic bag to keep them even more fresh. Let me show you one more hint that you can have. Now I found this little spray bottle, and in my spray bottle I have mixed an equal amount of water and glycerin together to make a mixture. And you can use this to refresh your stamp pads. You know how sometimes stamp pads get dry? You can try this on almost any stamp pad, spraying a little bit on until it's saturated, and that will refresh the color so you'll be able to use it again. So if your homemade stamp pads get a little bit dry, you can spritz them with some of your glycerin water and they'll come back to life. Let's make some fingerprint art using the stamp pads that we made. I've got myself all set up to do some fingerprint art. So I have my stamp pads ready. I have a bowl with a damp rag, and I'm going to use this to wipe my fingers in between my colors so that I keep my colors all bright and separate. Then I have some paper. I have a piece of white cardstock paper that I'm going to use today. Any kind of white paper will work for this project. And for later, I brought out all my markers because I'm going to show you some fun activities that you can use with markers to transform some of your fingerprints. So let's try it out. I'm going to make a fingerprint flower. I'm going to make my center with some orange. That one looks like it might need a couple of prints. I'm going to wipe my fingers off. I'll give that some purple petals. Now I'm using my pointer finger, but you can also use your thumb. You can see how it looks when you use different size fingers. And let's give this flower a little bit of grass. I'm going to use my markers to add some details. So I'm just going to put my grass down here. And you can just tap tap on the sponge and press your finger on your paper. This is a really good fine motor activity for young children. The process of stamping, really good pre-writing skills. Now let me show you something else that is a good activity for very young children. I'm just going to finish my grass here, and that would be if an adult or an older kid uses a pencil, we can draw a simple shape. Here, let me just do a square and a circle. And our challenge for our young children is going to be filling in that shape with your fingerprints, trying to stay inside the lines. So you could do initial letters, you could do fun shapes like hearts and stars for our kids to have fun filling in. And look how fun it looks when you overlap your fingerprints the way that they look when the fingers overlap like that. Cool. Let me add something to my scene over here. We'll see what this turns into when I add my details with my markers. So kids can make up all kinds of fun scenes using their different fingerprint colors, transforming them into all kinds of fun scenes. Let me add a couple more details here. I think I need some blue. And if your stamp pad gets dry, remember our glycerin spray that we can use. I'm going to spritz a little on my stamp pad if it gets a bit dry, and that will work to refresh it. All right, now if I'm done using my stamp pads, I'm going to make sure that I close them up because that will keep them nice and fresh for later. And then for some extra keeping them dry, I'm going to put these into a big Ziploc bag so they'll stay fresh. All right, now let's see what we can turn our scene into using some markers. I'm going to get a black marker here. And I'm going to turn these fingerprints into a little happy caterpillar. Now you can really use your imagination, turning these little ovals into whatever your imagination tells you. My flower here, let's give it a stem and some leaves. And up here, I think I'm going to turn these into, let's see, what are these going to be? Can you guess? Need a couple more colors here. Little beetle bugs flying around. Springtime is going to come soon. And here's my fingerprint scene. I hope you all have a lot of fun making art with fingerprints and stamp pads.